Hi, good evening, and welcome to Monday Motivation. Yes, my name is Jabu Zwane. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. Tonight, we are speaking about building a high performance mindset. As we all know, you can have all the talent in the world, all the skill in the world, all the energy in the world. In fact, you may even have the opportunities, you may have the capital, you may have the resources, and you may even have the people around you. But at the end of the day, if you are not going to perform, all of that means absolutely nothing. It counts for nothing. You know the saying, it is not about what you have, but it is about what you do with it. And as the crew right now was talking about Gaten McKenzie and speaking about sport, the model that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight actually comes from the sport itself. In my past time, I used to play basketball, I used to play soccer, but I did some stint at some point as a personal trainer. Specifically, I would actually be invited in to come and help these EFC, not UFC. In Africa, they've got EFC Africa, some of these professional fighters. And my job was to actually help them a little bit with a bit of the strength, the conditioning, a bit of the balance. And this is where actually this model came from in terms of understanding performance, that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you've got if you are not going to use it well. So in understanding performance mindset, this is a way of thinking that channels or that aligns all of your thoughts into what you need, the outcomes you need to achieve. Whether you're performing as a parent, whether you're performing as a leader, whether you're performing as an entrepreneur, whether you're performing as a professional, even as a regular employee, ultimately, all of us are going to be judged by the results, the outcomes of our lives. The measure of a person's worth, or rather the person's value, which is different from their worth. Worth, we're speaking about the intrinsic worth that all of us are equal before the law, before God, before each other, and that our human life is worthy regardless of whose life it is. Value, on the other hand, has everything to do with your contribution to your environment, your contribution to your workplace, to the people that you care about, and whatever it is that you're called to take part in. That is what your value is. And ultimately, all of us are judged according to that. How much we earn in terms of our salaries, how much we make in terms of our businesses, how much we charge in terms of our hourly services. All of that is linked to the value that we bring to the table. So how do you then ensure that you develop a high performance mindset? The starting point that I mentioned is to understand that performance is about outcomes. It is about high quality outcomes, but high quality outcomes start somewhere, and they always start with a purpose. Or you can say they start with a vision. Somebody has a vision to build the most helpful, let's say maybe a most helpful hospital in Africa, helping 1 million people a day. Right? So the outcome there is to help 1 million people a day in the most helpful way. And so there are going to be performance measures to ensure that you achieve that goal. But for that to happen, though, you're going to have to look at what is needed. In terms of human beings, of course, what is needed is their skills. And those skills are determined by the activities that one has to perform. And this is where normally when people are sitting down and they're drafting a job description, they're going to list specifically the activities that that this person has to be able to perform in order to achieve the outcomes that this particular portfolio or job is supposed to achieve. And so the starting point is to understand that. So what kind of activities need to be done to perform something? As somebody who's into public speaking, who's a professional speaker, who's a coach, and who's also a counselor, pastor, and operates in many respects as a leader, one of the most crucial activities, of course, is talking to people. But that activity in itself has to become a skill, and the skill is where you are able to effectively articulate whatever it is that you are looking for. You need to be able to do that. So in my particular case, as a communicator, I need to understand nonverbal communication. I need to understand articulation, enunciation, tone of voice, even as far as in understanding in certain spaces where I'm called in to speak for a certain amount of time. How many words per minute can I put in so that if I'm planning out a speech, I don't go over time? The second thing that you then have to look at is what is the capacity? What is my capacity to do whatever it is that needs to be done? So let's say, for example, that we need to deliver 1,000 tanks of water. One would have to look at, first of all, what are we using to deliver that water? If it's trucks, how many tons can that truck be able to hold? That's capacity. Similarly speaking, when you are doing a particular business, let's say you're starting an entrepreneurial journey and you're deciding, I'm going to start this business that is going to sell, let's say 1,000 products of whatever product I'm selling. How many people are required to produce that product? How many of them are required to be on the phones marketing, or what kind of activities do you have to do to market the product and to ensure that it reaches the clientele, the target market that you're looking for? And how many of those people, when they do come across the business, the product, how many of them then decide to buy? So, for example, if you're looking at your market, your sales funnel, especially if you're doing your digital marketing online, you're going to look at, from the people who are aware of your product, how many of them become interested by clicking on the actual product? How long do they stand there? At which point do they decide to actually put that product into the cart? And then once it's in the cart, how many people who actually do that activity of putting the product into the cart then decide to buy that and actually check out and successfully do that? So those activities are going to determine the sort of the resources and the skills that you're supposed to have. It's very difficult to talk about being a high performer if you don't have a specific goal, if you don't have tools if you don't have anything to measure. That's your capacity. And then the third thing, of course, is about your competencies. Now, how well are you doing the work that you are doing? One of the ways that you look at how well you're doing the work you're doing is that you must listen to feedback. What are the clients saying about the quality of the product that you're doing, that you're giving, the quality of the service that you're giving? What sort of feedback are they giving? How many complaints against the purchases that you are securing every single month? All of those factors, it's important to understand that if, to measure those, because if you don't measure those, then you don't know how well you're doing. You may think that you're doing the most fantastic work, but if you don't have a way for clients to give testimonials, to give feedback to you in terms of how well they're doing, if you don't have any way of being able to measure that, then you're obviously going to be in trouble. And then the other thing that you're going to look at, of course, is then your fitness. Now, your fitness obviously speaks to whenever you're performing, whatever you're performing, how long do you have to perform it? That is your endurance. How long do you have to perform what you're performing? The other aspect of that is about flexibility. So when you're under pressure, let's say there are any types of emergencies that come your way, are you able to operate under tremendous amount of pressure? How far can you be able to stretch? And then the other one is about your agility, and agility is about your ability to handle emergencies. One is about handling the pressure, the flexibility, how well do you operate under pressure? Another one is about emergencies, agility. In sports especially, the most agile sports people, of course, are the high paid. I mean, the fast ones, the ones that are able to do maneuvers. In terms of, let's think about football. When you think about a person like Lionel Messi or Ronaldo, the fact that they can be able to do the things they do at such a high speed and be able to maneuver the ball and shoot in very complex situations, that's agility. And those types of people tend to be paid quite well. And so in terms of then high performance, it's important then to be able to develop that agility. So when there are any distractions in terms of what you're doing, are you able to keep your eye on the ball and focus on what needs to be done and not be distracted? Have you developed any special skills that can be able to make you agile? Any kind of extra muscle, for example, any kind of stretching and flexibility that can be able to help you to be agile? Are you one of those people that you come to work and you want things to be exactly the same? In the moment that there's any kind of change, you get too unsettled, you get anxious, and then you start maybe falling on your words. You start not doing the best that you know you're able to in any other day when things are nice and calm. I was doing, I was running, I was doing a little bit of father-son duty on Saturday. My son is interested in sprinting. He's an aspiring 100-meter and 200-meter sprinter. And we were just doing some drills together. And then one of the things that I was just giving him a tip from my days when I used to be a sprinter, not that I was professional in any way. I just informed him, like, listen, when you're running and then your head is looking down for too long, you're losing a lot of speed because you're putting all the weight in front of you, and then you're making your legs work too hard. So you need to figure out a way to lift up your head as soon as you take off. See, if you don't learn those types of skills where you are able to understand, for example, big part of high performance is balance. And balance is not so much about equitable distribution of energy or equitable distribution of duties. It's not about equal distribution, rather. It's not about equal distribution of duties, of energy, of time, but it's about being able to find exactly that point where everything balances and it's able to work, even though in some spaces there may be some unevenness. Because the reality of it is that as human beings, we're not entirely balanced. I mean, they face right now is not the same on both sides. There is an unevenness on my face, but there is a balance because my face is still put together, right? It's interesting that they say, for example, if somebody were to come and cut your face in half like this, right? And then put this one half of my face next to this same half, I'm going to look like a completely different person. I may look like maybe a relative of mine, or maybe a brother, or maybe some kind of identical twin that has gained a bit more weight or gotten a bit more lighter, whatever the case might be. So there's that reality of, even in our own body, even though we've got two halves, you've got two hands, you've got two eyes, you've got two ears, you got 2 feet, and then seemingly you've got the left and the right. Both the left and the right are not even. However, they are balanced. And sometimes when people are talking about, having this balanced life, especially when you're trying to perform at a very high level, trying to achieve your goals, trying to achieve the things that you came here to do on earth, to do your thing, we always ask this question: what about the work balance, the work-life balance? And many people who have been able to do tremendous things will tell you that it's about how you define and understand what balance is. If you are trying to have an even distribution of time for everything that is important to you, then the likelihood is that you're not going to succeed. You're not going to succeed because not everything requires your attention the same way. In terms of time, our life stages, when you are younger, you have time ahead of you. You have a lot of vitality and energy. You have a lot of hopes and dreams because you're still looking forward to what's ahead of you. In terms of the environment that you're in, especially if you're in the work environment, your work is investing in your youth because they're looking at what the company can be able to gain from you in the future. Similarly, when all of us are looking at young people, we're looking at our young people, and we should look at young people as hope. And it's a bit of a travesty and a tragedy in our country that we have a country that has 59% unemployment rate among the young people. Of the 42% of people who are unemployed, 59% of that is actually young people who are under the age of 35. And that is a concerning, because that basically means all of the productive energy is sitting around idle. It's vulnerable to criminality. It's vulnerable to be taken advantage of. And it is important for us to find a way to work, to invest in our young people so that our country has a future. And so similarly speaking, it's important for us to understand that when we are young, we need to develop the skills. We need to expose ourselves to as many experiences as it is possible. What has been very encouraging to me, especially in the space of mentorship, in the space of coaching, most of the time when I either do talks online, or whether I do talks in person, or when I'm running any kind of seminars in the young people, so many of them are wanting to volunteer. So many of them are wanting to do something so that they can convert that productive intellectual energy into experiences that they can be able to leverage as time goes on. And it is so encouraging to see that happen. And I know that right now we have so many challenges in our country, and I would urge you, especially if you happen to be a business person or somebody that is highly experienced, to, in your own way, develop that mentorship culture. Because for our country to perform at a high level, we need for experienced people to pass down the experience that they've got, to also create opportunities and give the young energy access to platforms and environments where they would not ordinarily find such opportunities. And so it's important for us to do that. Why? Because if we don't do that, then the future of our country is in a lot of trouble. And what was interesting to me as well is this, that there is a research that came out somewhere around the 2029, 2018, I think, by the Entrepreneurship Forum, or Global Entrepreneurship Forum, GEF, where they were talking about how South Africa, in comparison to the rest of the African countries, is the most underperforming destination as far as entrepreneurship is concerned. And this is relative to what our country has in terms of resources, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of education levels, in terms of capital, and in terms of the history of the industrial history and capacity of the country, that we are underperforming, that we are being outdone by countries like Nigeria and West Africa. And I found that quite fascinating. And a big part of that is that so much of our attention sometimes gets removed from encouraging entrepreneurship and just mainly on education. So for us to be able to be a high-performing country and to develop a high-performing culture, we've got to be able to combine education and practicality as well. Similarly, in your own space, if you're only focusing on getting educated and getting the degrees and getting the PhDs, but you're not putting enough time in terms of developing your own experience as well, then you are nothing but somebody who speaks on theory on things and matters that they know absolutely nothing about. So I want to close off by saying, finally, to develop a performance mindset, it's important to understand, to have a purpose. What is that purpose? What is that vision? And what is that vision? What does it need in terms of activities and skills and abilities that you need to cultivate? You need to cultivate those skills and abilities. You need to take your time to practice them out so that they move from just being skills and abilities to becoming actual competencies that you develop. Like, you have a high level of proficiency. So, because it's a different thing to say, look, I've passed my Microsoft this, or I've passed my C++ this. It is only when you start to practice that out and you start to really test out your knowledge that you can develop that experience. And it is only at that point that you can be able to start build that value, the performance value. And when your performance value is built up to a certain level, then you are able to charge a certain amount of money, or you're able to get a certain amount of return on your effort. And it is something for us to be mindful of, is that when it comes to high performance mindset, when we are engaging our skills and abilities into trying to deliver what we need to deliver, what is the return on effort? What is the highest level of quality that comes along that purpose? So what do you need to get done? Number two, how well do you need to do it, which is your competency? Number three, what is your capacity? How much are you able to do? And of course, I've said fitness-wise, we've got to look at the energy with which you perform and deliver your work, right? We all know that energy is something that is very infectious. If a person has a high level energy person, then people ordinarily also as beings who copy, as beings who follow, then their mood, excuse me, and their mood is also uplifted. Their energies are also uplifted. There's a reason why we're drawn to people who've got high energy, who are charismatic, who are enthusiastic about whatever they're doing. Normally, we interpret that to mean that they're highly passionate, and passionate people by nature tend to draw quite a lot of attention. And then, of course, we're talking about endurance. As much as you can be able to do a whole bunch of things, and as much as you can be able to do them very well, and how long you can be able to do that, again, determines your performance value. If you're able to run for a long time, if you're able to focus on something for a very long time and still be able to deliver the high quality, that endurance counts for a lot. And then, of course, flexibility, which is about working under pressure. And then, of course, agility, which is about being able to deal with emergencies. And the last thing I want to talk about then, of course, is adaptability. Adaptability, which is the big word. And the big word, why it's a big word is because if we think about some of the Fortune 500 companies that have not existed that were around, let's say 30, 50 years ago, but are no longer around. Even here in South Africa, we can think of some of the brands that failed to go through that evolution, to adapt, that today, maybe in our time when we were still children, we saw them on television, they were huge. And today they're not there. Starterfoods, for example. We know some of them that almost went under, for example, like the Netcom Group, the Edgar's of this world, and you also, anyway, let me just stop talking about brands and giving them free advertising here. But you can think of it, so if you sat down and you began to write down all the companies that were massive, that were all over television during our childhood and today are not there, you can see it. And I like to show that whenever I do talks, I have this really powerful video that I show for 2.5 minutes. It's about VUCA. And VUCA is really the concept that was quite popular about 10, 15 years ago. It still is to a degree today because it's so quite, in fact, it's even more valid, I'm sure, today than it ever was, where it speaks about the volatility that exists in the world, the uncertainty that exists in the world, the complexity that exists in the world, and the ambiguity. So volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And the whole idea there was that if you don't know how to deal with those four things, if you don't know how to deal with volatility by learning, as I've mentioned, how to balance, how to be flexible, how to be agile, then you're in trouble. And then uncertainty. And uncertainty there is your ability to handle your anxiety about the future. That to be a high performer, you've also got to have a future mindset. And a future mindset also is dependent on the vision that you've got. Is your vision short term or is your vision long term? Are you living only and are you doing things only for today, or are you mindful of tomorrow? If you're only performing for today, you might find that you deplete your energy, you deplete your resources, you expand yourself over so many different domains, and you don't have some system of priority. And so when it comes to adaptability as well, is that you have to learn how to prioritize things. That certain things, although they may be important, but they're not as important for the future. They may be important for now, but they're not important for the future. And if you sacrifice what is important for what is crucial, then you're going to find yourself, especially with us. So when you sacrifice what is crucial for what is important, you'll find that all those aspects that are crucial for the future become emergencies. And then you're juggling way too many balls. You're losing your focus. You're losing your track. And you end up just wasting so much because you don't even know where you're headed. So adaptability is crucial. And to develop that adaptability is that we have to be able to keep up with what's happening in our industry. You've got to be able to keep up with the trends. You've got to be able to keep up with what's happening politically. You've got to be able to keep up with what's happening in terms of the business. You have to be able to keep up, especially with yourself as well, in terms of what is happening with you. For us who are sort of, maybe for not so much, but for people who are advancing in years, You have to be able to keep up on your health. What's happening with your level of acidity? What is happening with your potential to your vulnerability to diabetes, to high blood pressure, to back pains? If you don't pay attention to those type of things, you might find that you have difficulty again adapting to what's all the changes that are happening. To be a high performer these days, part of it is that, and especially an adaptable one, you have to be competent somewhat with technology. One of the most exciting developments for me is this whole idea of custom GPTs. Now, custom GPTs is like where you create your own generative AI or that intelligent language model specifically for your business. Where, let's say, for example, if you're starting out a business, you can create a custom designed GPT that can be able to write your standard letters, that can be able to answer questions when customers are asking questions about your product. You can be able to also generate your brand language. You can be able to generate marketing campaigns. You can regenerate even business plans specifically related to your particular business. The way that I'm using it as a communicator, I've got a GPT that is a speech craft mentor. And if I've got an important speech, especially if it's a subject matter that I'm not familiar with, I will write everything down in terms of my speech and I'll put it into my GPT, which is aligned with some of the top speakers, and it'll give me a metric rating against those key components of what makes a great speech, and it'll give me an understanding of whether or not my speech is on par or whether it is not on par. That's one of the ways that I'm using it. And the most exciting thing that I've done lately actually is that I've now created an online coach, an online GPT coach. Like literally, most of the body of work that I've done, that I've put there online, and then people can ask questions, mindset-related questions, and then my custom GPT is able to tell them or answer them the way that I would, to the best of its ability, of course, based on the amount of work, the amount of resources that I've populated my GPT with. This works extremely well, especially, let's say, if you have a business with frequently asked questions. If you've got a business with frequently asked questions, you can generate your frequently asked questions, generate flexible answers, link those answers with certain information about your product, about your services, about how you work. And then it has that intuitive generative response to those particular questions. And that is part of flexibility. And the question I will ask you is that in this day and age, especially in a particular industry, if it is, number one, risk vulnerable, if it's vulnerable to the risk of AI eliminating the job, what are you doing to ensure that you are protecting yourself against the future? Because there's one thing to be a high performer, and to be a high performer in a skill that is about to become redundant in a month, in 3 months, in a year, in 3 years. So again, looking at what I've just mentioned regarding these generative AI models, go and find out what is the risk of my job being eliminated in the next year, in the next 2 years. Perhaps there is information there that you can be able to use to prepare yourself for what's happening in the future. And if you don't do that, you will find yourself in tremendous amount of risk. There's a lot that we can share about how to become a performer. But to wrap it up for you, do you have a vision? If you don't have one, have one. Do you have a purpose? Is there something that you want to achieve in the next 2, 3, 4 years? Number 2, what activities, what skills do you have to develop in order to be able to achieve that? Number 3, how are you going to ensure that you increase your capacity to do what you want to do to achieve your goals? Number 4, How are you going to ensure that you are highly competent? You are as competent as you want to, so that you can be able to bring out the best quality work in what you're trying to do. Number five, how are you going to ensure your fitness? How are you going to ensure that you've got high energy, that you're flexible, that you can endure longer as you perform what you're doing at the best level possible, that you can be agile and be highly adaptable? And then lastly, this world is for those people who are constantly upskilling themselves, improving themselves. And if you have not been doing that, you're in trouble. Please, please, please make sure that AI is not a threat to your job, so that in your attempt to develop your new skills, you don't start up taking up skills that will be redundant in 3, 4, 6 months or a year or two. My name is Jabu Zwane. Thank you so much for tuning into Monday Motivation this evening. I hope you've learned quite a bit, and I hope you've learned a lot. Enjoy the rest of your programming, and see you again next week in studio. Thank you.